to cloud. Share screen. Cool. Can you all see my screen? Sorry, I can't see any of your faces. Can you all see my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
Cool. Recording is starting. Krypton check-in. Well, soon to be Xenon check-in.
I actually did not even realize this, but apparently the testnet got reset 2 days ago. I think we hit the exit at block height.
Damn, it made it to 10,000 blocks and it didn't explode.
Yeah, I'm gonna double check if it just exited because of the block height or there was something else happened. But if it did get to 10,000, that would be pretty impressive. Yeah, the timelines don't sound right to me, so I'm doubtful that it actually hit.
Oh, well, that's depressing. We should find out why.
Yeah.
Kind of important.
Oh, you're right. Maybe it could have happened. So the testnet should take about 13 days to hit that number. And I think the last reset happened on October 26th, right before the mining competition took off. So yeah, that kind of lines up. Yeah.
Sweet.
All right. Exciting.
Should we check the data and make sure that all the reward cycles went through? Like, yeah, should we do something with the data?
I think that would be wise. What's the best way to go about doing that?
I mean, we can get the on-disk state from the last reset. But I mean, the DevOps team can provide us that, but then someone would have to actually go through it, which I doubt they can do by themselves.
It shouldn't be that hard to figure out. It'd be great if we could couple it with a log file, because the log file will tell us which anchor blocks got accepted and when.
Sure, I think we can get the log file also. Yeah, let's just tag the DevOps team as an action item, and I can just let them know.
But cautiously optimistic, everything went well.
Yeah.
Cautiously optimistic. Let's go through the board. Alrighty, review in progress. Matt, I think I left some comments on this just to make sure that for the V2 upgrade, we hold off on the export until the Atlas network has had a chance to confirm all its transactions, and then the zone file replication is quiesced.
Yep, that makes sense. I saw that and replied. I think, so this PR is pretty much only for DevOps testing. So I think I'll address your comments in the follow-up PR where I'm doing actual like production changes for the export step, if that's okay.
Yep, that's fine. That explains what that comment meant then. Cool, is Pascal on the call?
I think Pascal is out for a couple more days at least.
Okie dokes, we can come back to this then. Last I saw this PR, we were going to increase the maximum mempool chaining to 25, but we don't really want it to be part of the config file because we want there to be a minimum built-in threshold for mempool TX chaining. Like if node operators want to increase it locally, they can do so. And I'd be okay with that being a config option, like an additional chaining, but I don't think it should be lower than 25 for the reasons that I outlined last week. Like we don't want it to be the case that, you know, you send your transactions and then you realize later that they aren't being replicated because somebody you're talking to has decided not to do chaining. Aaron, how are we doing on this? POX stacking operations on Bitcoin?
I think it's ready to review. It's been updated so that it only fetches operations from the parent burn block.
Okay.
So yeah.
I'll request review. Thanks for making that change. I know it's maybe not the fairest thing, but it's because this is kind of like a backup option. It's probably.
Yeah.
Ludo, how are we doing on the Atlas networking and BNS contract?
It's ready for review as well.
Excellent. You have all your tests?
So there's one test failing, but it's like a flaky one.
Which test is it?
So the get block in something. It's on my machine. It works on my machine. Let me see the PR.
Well, we will want to get that fixed one way or another. Maybe not in this PR, but if it's flaking out, like that could be evidence that something's going wrong. So I want to take a look at it.
Yeah.
But otherwise, good to know that you have, so that you feel like the test coverage is adequate, that we can review it now.
Yeah, I can add more tests, but we should start the reviews if it's possible. If you have some bandwidth.
Alrighty.
Large PR and.
Yeah, it is a big PR, but yeah, thanks for the heads up. I can start reviewing that today. Cool, so we got the PR here from Reed. At least I think this is the right one.
Yeah, that's correct.
Cool. I left some feedback. You feel like you can get around to that today or tomorrow?
Yeah, absolutely. That's really the only thing I'm working on today besides some documentation stuff.
All right, awesome. Just talked about this. So we're going to be getting Xenon up and running probably pretty soon. DeWalker just told me it would probably be around next week. Ludo, do you think you'll have time this week to get this PR?
Yeah, that's my goal for today. Yeah.
All right, sounds good. Then we can go ahead and review that and get that merged.
Mm-hmm.
Sweet. As for these three issues in the in progress category, still working on them. I hope to get a microblocks PR sometime this week that adds mining and it adds the poison microblock support on everything. Bulk of that's going to be test coverage. Most of the microblock stuff's been written for a long, long time and it's been working. It's just fleshing out the error pads. That's the primary thrust of this work here. I don't think Gavin's on the call, right? For the mining module modification?
Nope.
Okay.
Yeah, and go ahead, Aaron.
What's up, Aaron?
Sorry. So I think that as we go through this board, so one thing that's happening is I think that our reviewer approved column admits PRs that have only been approved by one reviewer.
Ah, okay. Yes, you're right. We do have these. Thanks for bringing.
Yeah.
So how are you? Go ahead. Sorry.
The event dispatcher updates is ready for review, and it's also blocking work on the Explorer. So if either you or Ludo can take a look at it sometime today, I think that would be pretty helpful.
I'll take a look right after this meeting. How are you feeling about the @block PR?
Yeah, I think it's also similarly just waiting on another checkbox.
All right.
And I think that we talked about the clarity defined cost functions already.
Yep, we did.
It's just like split between an issue and a PR there.
I will be careful about that in the future. I think we're otherwise good on in progress, right? Like most of this is just already known things, and zone file storage replication, that's already part of Ludo's PR. So backlog. Well, actually, new issues. So I saw you opened a couple of issues within the past couple hours, Aaron, about cost tracking.
Yeah.
So I'm not quite sure what this means here. Allow defined costs to interpose on contract call.
Yeah, so part of the idea with the voting on cost functions is that we could define a cost function for a user-defined function. So like if I make a library contract that implements like geometry operations or something,
Yeah.
and it's used by lots and lots of people, then like miners could choose to implement a more efficient version of it. And then we could vote in a new cost function to be applied whenever somebody contract calls those specific functions.
Related to this, one of the pieces of feedback I had on Reed's PR that doesn't have to be addressed in this particular PR, but will need to be addressed before mainnet is what happens if the cost function is multidimensional?
Yeah, so we've spoken about this a bit. I think that'll be kind of an easy change to implement.
Yeah.
We'll just accept like a list of inputs instead of a single input.
Do you want to maybe talk a bit more about that as part of implementing, as part of addressing this issue, Aaron, like maybe flesh out this issue to say that that's going to be a requisite work item?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, because I can see that easily becoming like the first stumbling block for this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that ultimately is probably going to be the easiest portion of this. Because like really all it's going to do is take the same number of arguments as the function itself takes.
Yeah. We would probably want to make sure that it's exactly the same as part of the
yes.
vote validation.
Yeah. The difficulty here, I think, is in interposing on the implementation of contract call. Because basically what has to happen is like when you do a contract call, you now like charge costs, and then you need to switch into a mode where you're not charging costs anymore during the evaluation of that contract call.
Yeah, you're right. We'll need to alter the cost tracker structure so it knows not to bill you for it.
Yeah.
Overarching, we also Reed, if you can correct me on this, the voting PR is going to come next, right?
Yeah, that's the plan.
Cool. But you haven't started on that yet. It's not going to be something we can review soon. Because I think that's going to probably have, I think these two issues are probably going to be pretty tightly related as well.
Yeah. I haven't started on that insofar as actual implementation goes. I think the plan is to kind of firm out the API of the contract so we can kind of get, so we can make progress kind of in other areas of the code that would be interacting with the voting contract. And then the details of, I think, like how the voting will actually work and which parties will kind of have, I guess, voting power and how that power will be split up is, I think, can come after we have kind of the basic API of the contract down.
Are you saying that voting will happen through a contract, or will it be some sort of external process?
At this point, I'm thinking it will happen through a contract.
Okay, we'll need to make sure that it's, I don't know the answer to this, but we'll need to make sure that that clarity is expressive enough to represent a variadic list of arguments. Because one thing that will need to happen as part of the vote validation process here is making sure that the cost function you're assigning a contract call has the same number and same types of arguments.
Yeah, so you could do the voting in Clarity, and then you could do sort of like result validation in the VM. And like, that's probably what we'll end up doing. So like you could have an election that like everyone agrees, like this contract was chosen as the definer of all of the cost functions. But then if the cost functions in that contract are like invalid for some reason, either they're like using operations which are illegal, or they're not formatted correctly, they don't have the right number of arguments, all sorts of problems that could occur.
Yeah.
that validation would happen sort of at the Stacks blockchain, like node level, like in Rust.
Yeah, I can't see that happening any other way.
Yeah.
We could probably do like an early validation pass though on votes, just so miners could, for example, see that their vote was rejected by the system itself because it was an invalid contract or something like that.
Yeah.
Instead of waiting until after the election.
Yeah.
Relevant to this.
Yes.
Yeah. Only arithmetic operations will be permitted in the cost functions. Yeah, sounds good. I'd imagine that's just a matter of walking the AST and making sure there aren't any nodes in there for IO or token operations or map.
Yeah, something like that. Like we could add a analysis pass that's just like checks for cost tracking legality, basically.
Yep, makes sense. Matt, do you have anything more to say about these three issues here about the export process?
No, not really, unless anyone has questions.
I think it all looks pretty good on my end. We'll just make sure to get those merged in so we can start testing it with DevOps. Cool. I had a new issue here just on microblocks. One thing that we will need to implement, possibly in a separate PR, is an anti-entropy protocol for the unconfirmed microblocks. This is a little bit different from how transactions are handled in that if you have a set of nodes replicating microblocks that are being pushed out by the miner, and some nodes don't receive all the microblocks, it would be useful if that node had a way to ask other nodes for the unconfirmed microblocks it's missing in order to present the unconfirmed state of the chain to its clients. We currently have the ability to do this. Each of the chain state query API endpoints take an optional tip argument, which can be the unconfirmed chain tip, which will allow you to do things like query state in microblocks that has not yet been confirmed, like by an anchored block. So being able to do that for things like block explorers, mempool explorers, other sorts of things, which will especially be helpful in touting microblocks as a fast confirmation path for your transactions. Making that all happen requires us to have a pretty reliable replication protocol for unconfirmed microblocks. We currently have the push end of this working pretty well. It's the same code path that transactions and blocks take, but we will probably also want a pull path as well in case a node is not selected for receiving a replica of a particular microblock, or the network dies and drops the message, thereby requiring a node to ask for unconfirmed microblocks. I can work on that this week if time permits, but I'm more interested in making sure that microblock mining and poison microblock handling works correctly. Aaron, you want to talk a bit more about this?
Yeah, sure. So we support basically two kinds of block commits. So there's leader block commits, and then in addition to the leader block commit Bitcoin message, users or whoever really is capable of submitting a burn support operation. Currently, this burn support operation only validates burns. It does not validate POX transfers. Mm-hmm. And so what this issue is about is basically updating this user burn support operation so that it is in line with the rest of the POX implementation.
Sweet. It's not yet assigned to a milestone. Is this something you can do this week, or when do you want? How do you see it?
Yeah, I can. Yeah, I can try to work on that this week. I was planning on working on helping out with the cost tracking work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Only reason I ask about this is because it's a consensus breaking change, and I think at least within Hero systems, is it the case that you guys want to make sure all those are feature complete by Thanksgiving?
Yes, I mean, I think all of these things are consensus breaking, right?
I know that there is something in microblocks definitely that will be done this week that's consensus breaking. Cost tracking is definitely consensus breaking. This, yeah. I'm not sure if the Xenon upgrade is or not, but the Atlas DNS part definitely is. So yeah.
Yeah, I can try to address this week. My only hesitation here is basically there's nothing terribly surprising, I would say, about this issue. Like, there's nothing uncovered here. Like,
yeah,
in my mind, this is like a very well-defined problem without like a lot of uncertainty. Whereas I think that there's still some uncertainty in some other issues, like implementation uncertainty.
I agree with that.
Agree
with that.
Yeah. In particular, I think that there's something that's in the backlog that we should discuss at some point, but we can come back to after we've gone through the rest of the new issues.
Sure. We're almost done with the new issues. Let's see. Actually, yeah, I think that was the last new issue. I think we've already talked about these. Cool. What was the backlog one you want to talk about?
I forget the name of the issue. Hold on. It's like POX, the like MARF commitments should not depend directly on POX fork right here. Yeah, it's right at the bottom.
Yep.
So I commented on the issue with kind of like two potential paths forward.
Okay. That's what these two are?
No. I think I think you have to go to the issue to see the full details.
Okay.
So I guess what I would like is some feedback on this from people, potentially maybe even with better ideas on how to address this. But yeah, I would say that this issue still has some implementation uncertainty. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if this took 2 weeks to implement.
Shit, that big, huh?
Yeah, I mean, it's changing the way that the stacks chain state works with respect to the MARF.
Okay, I will take a look at that once I'm done reviewing the other outstanding PR.
Cool. Yeah.
I hope it doesn't blow away all of our indexing work, because I think that would probably have a lot of surprising breakage.
Right. I don't think it would blow away all of our indexing work, but this has the potential to be a pretty nasty issue. So I think we should get some eyes and thoughts on this sooner rather than later.
Sounds good. Other backlog issues. This is an optimization. This can be pushed post mainnet. But speaking of mainnet blockers, this I guess falls under your category of no uncertainty in the implementation.
Yeah, or at the very least, very limited uncertainty, I would say.
Makes sense.
Like the uncertainty there is just like whether or not the like reward generation routine has access to enough information to query backwards, but I think it does. So I'm not that worried about it.
I think so too. I'm tagging this other issue here as a mainnet blocker. Implement the stacks token unlocking in Genesis block. It's kind of important for mainnet.
Yes.
This is, Matt, this kind of is related to the work that you're doing. It's like the other side of the coin. I was wondering if once you were done working on the export code, if you want to work on testing or potentially writing the import code.
Yeah, so the general task of writing like all the V1 code to ingest all of that is something that's upcoming soon. I think Ludo and I are both working on that.
Cool, because we will probably want to test this pretty rigorously as well, just like how we're doing the export testing.
Yep, I think it's all going to be in the same process. DevOps is expecting that.
Awesome. So Can I assign you and Ludo then on this issue?
Yeah, I think so.
Cool. Chain state crashing. This is again due to the improper use. I think this the consensus here. I don't know if we wrote it down. Was we need to use the write ahead log, and implement our own busy handler.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that there's potentially two paths for. So we need a busy handler, and we should use wall mode so that we don't need the busy handler as frequently, right?
Well, to be clear, we can't use a busy handler in the context of save points, but we can emulate one.
I couldn't find that in the SQLite documentation.
What's up?
I could not find any discussion of busy handlers not being allowed with save points in the SQLite
so I
documentation.
this information from a forum post from the SQLite developers.
Oh.
Where someone was asking about this and they said, no, you're misusing save points. If you think you need a busy handler for them, you should be doing them all in transactions, or you should rethink your queries. Well, that's not really enough.
But I think like the way that we're using save points would work with busy handlers. Like the busy handler would get invoked when we try to start the transaction, because like all of our save points are actually in a transaction.
Right, but you can still get a database is locked error by trying to start a save point.
But how? You've already started a transaction.
I'm not entirely sure how. I just know that it happens.
I see.
That's what these stack traces are.
I thought these stack traces are happening because there's no busy handler for the Clarity SQLite database.
Oh no, there is. I made sure of it. That's why it's surprising.
I see.
I'm sorry, it's not necessarily the begin save point. I think that's triggering this. I think it's either the begin save point or it's the insert that happens within the save point that triggers this, even though a busy handler is installed. And that was again the specific. I can go find the forum post. Some person was complaining that they were getting databases locked errors, even though they'd set a busy handler because they were using save points. I think it's because the reason the busy handler gets invoked at all when we begin the transaction is because we're beginning the transaction in immediate mode. Normally SQLite uses deferred mode. So when you try to, you only hit the database's launch problem the minute you try to write. And I think the forum post, if I remember correctly, was specifically talking about how you couldn't change that deferred mode behavior for save points. And the guy was surprised that he was unable to do so, in part because his busy handler was not getting invoked at the beginning of the save point, as opposed to when you try to insert data.
Yeah, I mean, it might also be possible not to use save points at all in the Clarity DB.
We use them right now so we can do a block-wide rollback in the event of a bad transaction, if I recall correctly.
Block-wide rollback.
Like we do a save point for a stacks transaction, but that's all inside the context of a single SQLite transaction that applies to blocks transactions. Because the save point ID is the block hash for this reason.
Yeah.
But if we can catch these databases is locked errors, instead of calling expect on the result returned by the SQLite insert, we ought to be able to emulate a busy handler, and we just retry with backoff, and we can minimize the occurrences of that backoff behavior using wall mode, I think was the consensus. But again, it's all due to the weirdness of save points interacting with busy handlers that SQLite does not handle in the way you would expect.
Yeah. I still think it may be possible to implement the Clarity DB's interactions without save points. Because we're using transactions to implement a very similar behavior in its MARF. And so if we switch the Clarity side store to use the same database as the MARF, which we should do, because without that, there's maybe a little bit of a race condition.
Yep, you're right.
If we do that, then we should be able to just use the same rollback logic, which does not require save points.
Yeah, you just drop all the rows and you keep
Yes.
it. Yeah. Does that summarize it pretty much?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. That's good to know. I can try to take this if I have time this week, but I don't think I will.
Yeah.
But it will need to get done before it is mainnet blocker though, because it will.
Yeah.
I think the rest of these we've already talked about before, so we can go ahead and skip them. But I did have one other question that is not covered on this board that is becoming relevant. We don't have a way to safely stop a stacks node. I think there might be an issue somewhere.
Yes.
But it sounds like we will want that pretty soon. Just because if we're going to be testing this on Xenon, applying non-consensus breaking changes cannot be done through a chain reset anymore. Right?
Yeah, I think that is true. There's like a question of whether or not this problem is like specific to our deployment strategy. But also, yeah, I guess there's no code in the Stacks blockchain to gracefully exit, right? We would just be hoping that when we sig term the process, like it leaves the database in a state that it could recover from.
I don't believe that's true. In part just because we have multiple databases.
Yes.
In particular, we have the Sortition DB, we have the BurnChain DB, we have the Clarity DB, we have the Stacks blocks DB.
Yes, but the coordinator does handle those being out of sync.
It does, and each database is individually crash consistent.
Yes.
Well, not quite yet. With the side store being separate from the block, that's not crash consistent, but it imminently could be.
Yes.
So you're saying as long as how certain are we the coordinator can recover from a node crash?
So I don't know how well it can recover from a node crash, but it does deal with the databases being out of sync with each other. That's sort of its default mode of operation. Is like when it gets invoked, it checks how far along the BurnChain DB has progressed. And if it's ahead of the Sortition DB, then it tries to update the Sortition DB. Every time it updates the Sortition DB, it checks the chain state to see if there's any new pending blocks that can be processed.
If we, I don't yet know what the interplay looks like between the Clarity VM and the Stacks Chain State DB. Because I think there's two of those. Actually, there's actually two chain state databases, right? There's the headers DB, and then there's the blocks DB.
Correct. Yeah. Each with their own marf.
No, the blocks DB doesn't have a marf. That's just that's like a chunk storage. It just has block data.
Well, the headers DB does.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
I believe that's already contained within the marf too. There's no side store for that.
Yeah, there's no side storage.
We could combine the header DB with the block DB. Like to make it all transactional. So that the act of processing one block also is the act of inserting its header. So I think those are separate transactions now.
Yes, I think that's true.
Yeah, we need to open an issue for that. I can just make an action item for this. Because if we can do that, then it ought to be possible. Then that I don't think it quite solves the problem of crash consistency, but if we could somehow tie the blocks DB to the Clarity DB, then I think that would fix the problem. That would make it so that the coordinator can always recover.
Yes.
So I have a question concerning this feature. I've been working on this, and it was a bit, I think it's a lot of work and it's a bit challenging. Is there another maybe shortcut where, what's our take on having some kind of node that is archive only, and it's basically archiving all the blocks that it receives, and then it's like some kind of CDN, and yeah, maybe something that the idea would be to have this kind of archive node always on, and we can bootstrap on this node, and in case of failure.
Yeah, that's what we have to do until we have crash consistency. It's just that the time to bootstrap a new node with new changes is going to get longer and longer and longer. Scratch each time.
Yeah, I understand that, but I feel like aiming to have this crash consistency capability, like this ability to recover and read the state from disk, I think is going to take some time. So is there another path?
A compromise we could have is, can we add a safe shutdown procedure so that even if the node does not crash per se, you could still send the process sig term and it would know to finish processing whatever it's doing, commit any state, and then just exit. So that way we're not dealing with inconsistent databases. Another option is, instead of trying to merge the databases, we could add some sort of recovery process that just gets invoked each time we process a block, kind of like what the coordinator does.
Okay. Okay, sounds good.
Cool, I think that's it for the board. Go ahead and pull this back up. Does everyone know what they're doing this week?
Yeah.
Cool, stop share. Is there anything else? Questions, comments, concerns?
Oh, I would add, I did get a test ground plan running
Sweet.
with the Stacks nodes. It currently just lets you spin up an arbitrary number of Stacks node miners, and they'll communicate with each other, which is pretty cool. The only metrics it collects are the block height from each node. But if you get like super creative, I think with an event handler, you could probably collect all sorts of metrics. Or if you want to parse the logs. I'll link it in case people want to play around with it at some point.
Is that published somewhere?
Mm-hmm.
Is it in the Stacks blockchain or is it separate?
Yeah, it's separate. It's
Aha. Personal repo.
It's a fork.
Yeah. Put that in
no, it's a brand new history. No fork. Yeah, it's written in Go. It's very upsetting, Matt. Yeah. Yeah, it's Go written by someone who doesn't understand at all how Go works. So.
Wait. So I'll have to take a look at this. I thought test ground let you do things like at least shell out and do stuff, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm doing from Go.
Oh, I see. You're using Go to shell out to get the stuff that you want in the database.
Yeah, it's because their SDK is only written in Go. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. Go.
So I use the Go process just to kind of like orchestrate the Stacks node.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Cool. Do you know about how much time you'll have to keep working on this? Like what sorts of results you think you can glean from it?
Probably won't have a ton of time to work on it, but I think that we're going to try to work with our DevOps crew to see how much they could kind of extract out of it, and then try to get a big deployment running.
Awesome.
Yeah,
would love to get all the network torture tests automated.
Yeah,
and running quickly. Sweet. Do you want to link that in an issue on the GitHub? Because maybe we could start hosting that inside the Stacks repo.
Yeah.
Sweet. All right, anything else? I did have one thing that occurred to me. Once we get BNS merged in, which should happen this week, I think, is there an integration plan or an integration test procedure for Connect and the UX team to make sure that everything is working with Stacks 2?
Sorry, I heard my name. What's going on?
I was just asking, once the BNS contract and zone file replication gets merged in, is there an integration test plan for Connect and for other UX related work, like the current Explorer perhaps?
Well, I believe we have to update the registrar mainly with this work. I haven't looked into the details yet, but our plan is generally the second half of this month to do that work, pending on your all work, which it sounds like it's wrapping up. So we should discuss it soon. Once we make those updates, the next step is then to pass it off to the foundation. Should we sync separately and talk about the details there, or how do you want to go about it?
Yeah, that probably makes sense.
We're not in a rush from our end, so how about I let you all know in a couple of weeks when we're ready to take this on, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, that sounds good. And it'll give us a chance to shake things out too on our end.
Cool.
All right, cool. Gonna stop recording then.